Ichigo will never be the same after this episode. I truly thought that after watching Yamamoto vs Yhwach last week that we had reached a peak, but I was dead wrong. The peak continues to rise and this episode was literal proof of it. With anime original scenes of some of the most anticipated and speculated characters in the story, a fight with animation on par with the best of fights in modern anime, and perhaps the most anticipated quote within the 1000-year Blood War, oh boy, we have a lot to discuss from this episode of quite literal perfection. With the episode's opening, I was genuinely shocked to see something that us as fans have long speculated within the original Gotei 13. Last week, Kubo released a poster of this long-awaited group, and oh my god, they look incredible, and on my first impression, I thought it was just a cool thing that he did for us as fans to get us excited about the series, but I was wrong. This little reveal set up for a glorious anime original adaptation of the battle that took place 1,000 years ago, and since seeing this flashback, I haven't been the same since. All of the original captains were merciless killers and their designs are incredible. Shout out the pink-haired girl with the eye patch. Let's be honest though, did anyone think that Kubo would ever let us down within character design? That's one of his biggest strengths and one of the reasons Bleach appeals to so many people before they even start the series. With the reveal in this flashback, all of the captains are surrounded in fire and the shadows contrasting with the light makes them all the more ominous. Rather than us being able to see their eyes, we instead see light reflected from the flame, which has them appear all the more terrifying. For anime onlys, there was a reveal within this flashback that within the manga wasn't until later in the story, but the timing and placement of this reveal sent shivers down my spine with the hype of what's to come. What's so cool about this reveal is that you can't immediately tell who it is, but given how similar they look, yeah, if it's who you think it is, yeah, you're probably right. I still can't believe this moment within this episode is real, and this genuinely feels like a moment where the anime has truly surpassed the manga. With piles of corpses, a dark ambiance, and Soul Society enveloped in flames, Yamamoto walks across dead allies and enemies alike, and rather than defeating Yhwach in a traditional fight, instead Sasakibe rises from the pile of corpses to drive a sword through Yhwach and enable Yamamoto to have a clean hit on Yhwach to strike him down. I'm so glad Sasakibe got more screen time and added backstory. He wasn't just a lieutenant sitting idly by during the initial invasion, he was a key component to the defeat of the Quincy. His ambition was always to help Yamamoto in any way he could, and he sure as hell did. This notion of Yamamoto winning by guile and deceit, it's reflective of how Soul Society used to be. They weren't captains with honor, but instead bloodthirsty criminals who achieved victory by any means necessary. This element is so poignant because it's reflective of the way Soul Society has changed as we're brought back to a more current flashback. Speaking of this flashback, did anyone else smile super wide seeing young Shunsui and his interactions with Yamamoto? I love seeing the father-son relationship between the two. Within this flashback, we can see a painting of Yamamoto with his Zankai no Tachi West form, and upon questioning of the painting, rather than Yamamoto being proud of it, Yamamoto speaks of this entity in the photo as a monster who causes more destruction than good. It's as if he views the previous version of himself, the bloodthirsty commander of the Gotei 13, as a part of himself he no longer identifies with. This very notion is touched upon by Yuha as Yamamoto's body quite literally is split in half, and Yuha states that the Gotei 13 died along with the Quincy 1,000 years ago, that peace had made them weak due to their desire to protect, nurture, and raise the next generation of Shinigami, that the old Gotei 13 didn't care about peace or society as a whole. Rather, they cared for unquestionable bloodshed and combat. This concept is chilling. Yuha, rather than being met with an unbridled military force he fought a millennia ago, instead is met by a generation of captains he views as weak. War is touched on plenty throughout this arc, and we can see varying angles across characters with their respective stances on it. In the case of Yuha, he finds peace and serenity to breed weakness and destruction. This is one of the reasons I find Yuha to be such a compelling antagonist. Rather than having an objective that we can reason with or potentially see the logic within, such as Aizen's, Yhwach is an unquestionable evil within the story that makes every action he takes resulting in despair and darkness for our heroes. As Yamamoto's light is quite literally snuffed out, there's some explanation for a question I'm sure many had within why Yamamoto didn't restore his arm after battling Aizen. The reason is indicative of the weakness that Yhwach mentions, that Yamamoto didn't want to exploit humans. He very easily could have asked Orihime to heal him, but Yamamoto in his age became an honorable man who loved and cared for others. He didn't desire to manipulate or exploit others, especially humans who he's sworn to protect. This stark contrast from how he used to be versus now is something Yhwach detests, and I love that we can see the growth within the humanity of Yamamoto, while we can see Yhwach possess quite literally the opposite of humanity. It's a genuine tragedy that Yamamoto takes his last breath within this episode because his character is unquestionably one of the best in the series, and his death is something that really does set the stage for the seriousness of this last arc. This isn't an arc where the good guys inherently win with almost no losses. No, this arc is a fight for the very survival of this world. It's full of bloodshed, destruction, and chaos, and I'm loving every goddamn minute of it. The emotional notes that were hit with the expression of all the captains realizing Yamamoto died, they were viscerally chilling. especially with the reaction of Shunzui, who we just saw in the flashback, who we know is by far the closest to the head captain. Our Shinigami, previously emblazoned by Yamamoto's resolve to fight, our Shinigami are now left on their own, without the man they've relied on for all this time as their trump card. The first half of this episode was a 10 out of 10, and the second half, with the focus now shifting to Ichigo, sure as hell matched that perfect score. Within Quilgi's jail, Ichigo continually sees the lights go out within Serete as lives are continually taken out en masse by the Quincy invasion. Ichigo's voice actor did an incredible job portraying and expressing the combination of fear, anger, and helplessness Ichigo feels within this inability to do anything while those he's sworn to protect continually die off. This prompts Ichigo to finally break through the jail as he's brought to Soul Society in ruin. Rather than entering the battle in the state of mind he was previously, full of emotion, full of sadness, he arrives with a darkness and unbridled rage, and he hardly says a word outside of the confirmation of Renji and Rukia's survival. Shout out Rukia. This scene within Ichigo arriving to Byakuya is one of the most anticipated ones of this entire arc, and is the source of one of the most frequently reposted manga panels on Bleach. Byakuya, a man embodied by his pride, now on his deathbed throws aside this pride which his character has personified for so long. He laments his inability to do anything to protect Soul Society despite being a captain, and he grieves the troops he had led to their death, and he now asks Ichigo one final request from a dead man: to protect Soul Society. This culmination of the development of Byakuya is fully solidified within these moments. It was beautiful. With rain falling around them, Byakuya's voice breaking as he asked this request, and even Ichigo shedding a tear, this moment was everything I could have hoped for and more. Rather than answering the request, Ichigo's spirit energy swirls around him, and we can see the dark resolve in his face as he arrives to finally stand before the man who's responsible for destroying Soul Society. I love the notion of Ichigo not answering, and he does this for an obvious reason. This request was something Byakuya already knew the answer to. Ichigo's entire character, his motivation, it has always been about protecting, and he sure as hell will give it his all to do so. I truly didn't think the animation could surpass last episode's, and I'm so glad I was wrong. And it even reminded me with very similar scenes as other animes in their most hyped moments. Ichigo's rage upon Yhwach admitting he's responsible is a top 10 rage moment within anime, and it really gives me Mob Psycho vibes due to the visual effects and seeing Ichigo's rage truly personified within a spirit energy. This moment was another one that I felt surpassed the manga because of the delivery, the music, the animation. It's impossible to replicate within just paneling. Hell, the clash of Ichigo and Yhwach causing everything around them to split apart and their energies clashing, it reminded me of Whitebeard and Roger's clash within One Piece. I loved this moment so much, and my god, I've rewatched it countless times. This fight was full of unfiltered rage from Ichigo with his relentless attacks, and despite his resolve throughout this perfect fight, despite seeming to continually lose, Ichigo gets back up time and time again, and in a moment where his throat should have been cut, Ichigo survives due to activating Blute. This reveal and shock made me jump out of my seat even though I knew what was coming, as Ichigo slashes with such dark energy from his Getsuga Tensho, and it solidified in the story part of Ichigo's identity that will change his character forever. Yuha explains that through slashing against the jail, the spiritual pressure of Quilgi with his Quincy blood, it slowly leaked into Ichigo's own soul and awakened Ichigo's latent nature with being a Quincy. Yuha confirms this by saying, after all, Quilgi's jail restrains enemies, but it cannot restrain a Quincy. Yuha with this reveal tells Ichigo he knows nothing of his mother, implying the Quincy nature Ichigo possesses is directly from her. Ichigo's mother has always been an emotional spot for him that he's never been able to let go of, and Yhwach speaking on her drives him into a frenzy mentally as he's full of rage, yet simultaneously having so many questions about who he really is. Ichigo, in a moment prior where his resolve seemed the highest, is now met with the peril of his own thoughts. Ichigo is a character shaped by his mental state, and now once more he will be on a journey to discover his true nature, his true self. With Ichigo essentially being bodied, the Quincy's time within the Serete runs out, and the dialogue with Yhwach and Jugrum discussing Yuha's perception of time being altered due to Aizen, it was absolutely brilliant. Despite Aizen being restrained, he was able to alter the senses of the literal god of Quincy's. Aizen's stocks have continually been on the rise and do not expect them to slow down. With the episode soon closing out as Ichigo charges one last time towards Hashwalth, his blade is broken in half as Yhwach leaves, calling Ichigo his son born into the dark. There's a lot to pick apart here. Firstly, Bankais when broken don't just regenerate, they're simply broken. Zanpakuto are a manifestation of the spirit of its user, and this moment with the Ichigo's blade being broken is reflective not only of his defeat of the body, but his defeat of the spirit. The episode title and closing line of Son Born in the Dark, it foreshadows the backstory to come for us to truly understand Ichigo's roots. Time and time again, Ichigo thinks he knows all there is to know about himself, and we're continually thrown into the reality that he hardly knows the truth about himself. I still remember my shock of learning his father is a Shinigami, and now we have another surprise once more. He is truly born in the dark. Ichigo will never be the same after this episode. His greatest fear within the inability to protect was put on the forefront, a concept that has defined Ichigo's mental state for hundreds and hundreds of chapters. Within Ichigo's mother and her death being one of the greatest roots of his darkness, now being brought to light once more, From this moment on, Ichigo will have to face the demons of his past, a weight so heavy on his soul and his shoulders that he's had to bear for all this time. I felt every emotion this episode, from immense hype of the original Gote 13 flashback, to the excitement within Ichigo's fight, the sadness within the brutal reality of the outcome of this invasion. This is peak fiction, this is Bleach. If you enjoyed my content, please do consider dropping a subscription. We cover Bleach every week, so if you're a fan of Bleach, this is the right place for you. Most importantly, let me know in the comment section below your favorite moment of this episode. My favorite moment of this episode was Ichigo's rage and spirit energy around him right before first attacking Yuha. My god, how could you not love that scene? This has been Hickstra, and as always, be greedier, and I will catch you all next time.